This is the Viviva sketchbook, and it's the premium handmade sketchbook. This is a square cotton 7.5 times 7.5 inches, and it has 40 pages, 20 sheets, so you can use both sides of the page. It's made from 100% cotton paper, it's 300 GSM, it's cold press and acid free. So let's open this up. It's made from faux leather, meaning it's not like actual leather, therefore it's vegan, right? And it's supposed to open up fully, and it's handmade, so it's made in India, in Nashik, the same place that makes the papers. The logo of Viviva colors is printed at the bottom. There's a strap that you can use to hold the book together, the pages together. It opens up totally flat. This is a normal sketchbook where you actually can't lay it flat, right over here, as you can see. And the Viviva sketchbook, you can open it up, and it's totally flat. So I think what they did was they detached this part. Normally for a book, they would actually attach the spine, you know, the backing to the spine of the book. But this one, they separated it so you can just open it flat. I think this is kind of a nice thing that they did. I find that the first page, it's a different paper, provides like a little cover for the actual sketchbook that you see, that you use. And then once you turn this out, you will actually get to the paper. And interestingly, if you look at the texture of the paper, it's supposed to be cold press, but I find it's so rough. So yeah, it's my first time using something so rough. And I think I would like to also point out, they really seem to be handmade, because can you see all these imperfection? You see all these different imperfection on every page. Like generally you see a kind of a pattern, but you see all these imperfection, which is I think kind of interesting, because you know you when you paint, you know, you can get a little bit of a difference, and it's just kind of interesting. Over here you do get a little speck here. So yeah, and you see this one here that is like a little bit, so it's that there is imperfection in the pages, but it's just a little bit more different. It's different and it's more organic. And at the back you do have a pocket for you to put stuff, okay? But there isn't, like unlike here, like having this page, right, this cover page, there's no cover page at the end. So this, you can still use this, but this would really be like the end of it. So yeah, this is how it is constructed. So in the next segment, I will share with you how it performs in all these like tests that I normally do for watercolor paper. Firstly, I just want to clarify that I am an ink and wash person, so I do a lot of pen work and then ink and watercolor on top. So I'm actually approaching this from the point of view of a sketcher who does ink and wash technique. So the first test that I actually look at is the interaction of the pens, different types of pen, different permutation, you know, a test of pen ink onto this paper. So for this, I need to have two pens. So I have my representative pen for thin nib, which is the platinum carbon pen over here. And then I also have the nib is tiny. It's like extra fine nib, so it's super thin. And it's sometimes very hard to use it, because it might, you know, it can be a little bit more scratchy. And then I have this super thick nib, and this is from Mont Blanc, which is the Fude nib, right? The one that I have reviewed recently. So we are going to do it in two ways. So first, there are a few permutations to it. So firstly, I would be trying out different speed of writing, fast and slow, and then the nib size, so thin and thick, and then I'll also be using it like you know, with no watercolor on it yet, and then overall watercolor. And I'm going to start with the thin first, so I'm just going to do thin all the way. So thin with fast. So I think the problem with thin nib sometimes is that it gets very scratchy. And it's very difficult. It can get like skips. So I'm quite impressed. Like I could get this to work really fast. Like I didn't really get much skips, okay? And then if we do this slowly, I think we probably can do this quite slowly and there wouldn't be any issue. So the thing about doing slowly is whether it would cause bleeding or feathering through, you know, to the other side, which I think it's fine. So as you can see, it's working quite well. And now I'm going to do this on the part that has already have some watercolor on. And so far, I think it's not causing me any more problem. Then yeah, it's not causing me much of a problem. Even when I do it slow, I think there's slight feathering, as you can see. But other than that, I think that is so much it. And I don't really get like amazingly, I think the ink dries pretty fast. I'm not sure if that's related to the ink that I'm using. The ink that I've used with this is the Platinum Carbon Black ink, okay? And I'm going to use the thick nib, which is the Mont Blanc Fude. I think it's called, I forgot the name. So I'm going to do fast. Okay, and I think the skip is more the fact that you actually have a lot of the, the grids, because there's some pattern and some texture to the paper. So I'm just a little bit worried about it, the slowness of it, like whether I would have feathering and like bleeding through on the other side. So that is something. So yeah, as you can see, the more ink that I have, the more of it does not dry. But then again, it could be because of the ink, because the ink that I'm using here with the Mont Blanc is their permanent black ink. So I'm just going to do it really quickly over here as well. So I think there's not much change. I get some of this texture, but that's because of the actual texture that's on the paper itself. So same. I'm going to just try to do the same thing. Yeah, so you actually see that they are very, very similar. Let's check if it bled through to the other side. Nope. Okay, so it's a thick paper, there's no bleeding. So it does not bled through, works okay. So I think the only issue here is with the pen and ink and wash, using pen for drawing, is that the texture can be a little bit hard for you to produce really straight lines. So if you're the kind who likes very detailed work and fine lines, and you want the lines to be absolutely neat, this is not the paper for you, because it has texture. But it's not so bad. I don't get a lot of skips. The next test, the granulation test, right? And this is also where I test whether the paper warps and buckles. So far, it's okay. Like when you paint it, like when it's really wet, it does buckle quite a lot. But then I think if you close it, after drying and you close it, it will flatten out. So there's no issue. It does not remain buckled, so it's fine. As you can see from the granulation test, it granulates and it separates out really, really nicely. So you can see that this is two ways. I actually put water first and then paint in, and this is Vega. So Vega is like a separating watercolor where there's actually two pigments and they separate out differently because of the weight of the pigment and the size of the pigment. And this is when I actually just paint a strip of the mixture, and I put water to kind of let the color like run, the pigment run. So you see this interaction separates up really nicely, gets some of blooms as well. And other tests that I do for watercolor would be the lifting, layering, and edges. I think they are kind of similar because they are the interaction of how paint can be like manipulated on the paper. And what I found is that this paper is kind of delicate. Like you can't really do a lot of things to it. Like it's not suitable for like heavy lift. So as you can see, for lifting I have two paints. This is easy to lift, no problem with that. But for dioxazine, there is some piling after I kind of scratch it a little bit too much. So be very careful. You can't lift, you can't use a paintbrush and go over many times. You're gonna get this is gonna happen. And then even for the edges, so it's fine if it's fresh, but when it's totally dry and you try to like, can you see the little paper pile, that's kind of like sticking there. So just be very careful with the surface. I would suggest not really doing too much, like paint goes in and try not to do too much with it. You might add a second layer, so second layer is okay. Try not to do too many layers with this one. I also look at the intensity of colors, like whether the colors pop. So this paper is different. It's slightly more ivory. It's an ivory color. So as you can see, the colors are not too bright, but I think you can still see the difference. And I also did with the gouache, color pencil, and also did with ink. So for ink, I don't think it's suitable for ink because it does not really show a lot. You don't get to see all the properties with this paper. Like the sheening, I don't see a single sheen here. Shimmer is there, right? You see a bit of like the multicolor, and you do see, for multicolor ink, you do see a bit of it, but it's really very dependent on the pattern, and it's not very organic. And with regards to gouache and watercolor in color pencils, I think it's the texture as well. You can't really get a very smooth application with gouache. You're gonna get this kind of effect. Yeah, and for color pencils, it's gonna be even more obvious. So I actually devised two other tests to look at how delicate the paper is. First is the masking fluid test. So what I did was I just put masking fluid onto the paper. And let's try to kind of lift this out and see whether it will kind of affect the paper. Seem like it will. So as you can see like when I'm trying to lift this off, I might pull out some. You see, I might pull out, and I might pull out some. This is if I'm not wrong, this is the De La Roni masking fluid, so you might pull out some of the surface. So just be very careful when you use masking fluid. You know how we always use like a masking tape to tape the edges? Alright, and there is also another test. I tape the edge. If I try to tear this part out, can you see that it does, like if you actually use it or you press too hard, you can get some of that paper coming out. So yes, be very careful how you use this paper, because it is quite delicate, right? So this is the piece that I've done. I painted a pad thai, and I used the color that was provided by Viviva. So I used the Viviva watercolor set for this. You can see a lot of these texture. You can see all these like you know, the pattern on the paper. That's pretty obvious, because when I pull the masking tape off, I wasn't very gentle, so I pull off quite a lot of that. So be very careful. And then I think another issue I have is, of course, with painting all these lines. So if you are like into very detailed things and going to use like very fine brushes to paint all these fine lines, you will see all these skip. But if you're the kind who just paints, like you do draw lines and then you just paint color over, I think this is okay. It's a little bit more special. Like if you're really bored with having one patch of color, you know, by just having a textured paper like this, you can actually see that there is some variation, even though there's just one single color wash. This is just a kind of a first impression video, because I think I haven't really used this paper except for this one over here, where I attempted to paint it in a more watercolor style, like with a bit of more details. I'm still not totally convinced that what I think is going to represent my final thoughts about it. So you know, just to kind of summarize the first impression that I have of this paper: very interesting texture, nice granulation, kind of do quite well in lines, so you don't really get like very bad feathering, you don't get bleeding through. Bad point being the surface being quite delicate. You can't do much lifting, you can't do too much layering, too much water work, you can't try to scrub stuff out. And the texture is very obvious, the grids that you see is very obvious. And also because the surface is so delicate, that you know, you can get like the paper coming off if you apply like masking fluid, or if you use a masking tape for the borders. I think in the future, I will try to actually do a watercolor, do an ink and wash, an urban sketch, a quick one, without much like playing around too much with the watercolor, just to see how it works. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see similar content. I'd like to thank again Viviva for sponsoring this sketchbook. I am an ambassador for them, and I will be creating videos for them for next 5-6 months. And yeah, if you have any questions about the colors, if you have any questions about the products, do let me know and I can ask them, or I can request for more products for review. Okay, so yeah, see you again in the next video. Have a great week ahead, great month ahead. Bye bye.